There are few things more fascinating, tragic, and eerie than a shipwreck. Whether it's a warship lost in battle, a deliberately sunk diver's wreck, or a steamer sent to the bottom by waves and weather. Some of these ships sit as skeletons on beaches and coasts. Some have been raised and housed in museums, and others still sit leagues beneath the ocean, preserved by the salty seawater. Welcome back to Re-Inspired Adventures. I'm Anthony, and let's get started. First up is the Demetrios in Peloponnese, Greece. The Peloponnese is a leaf-shaped region that dangles from the edge of mainland Greece. It's also home to the rusting hulk of the shipwreck Demetrios, located on the area's eastern shore near the charming port town of Githeo. How the ship came to be there is something of a mystery. Some reports say it was caught up in cigarette smuggling and was burned to cover up the evidence. Others that it was simply abandoned. Whatever the true story, we do know that the Demetrios has been lurking on these shores since 1981 and has gradually drifted out to its current location. Today it's a popular wreck with photographers thanks to its accessible location. Next up is the Corpatch wreck in Fort William, Scotland. Built in 1975, the fishing trawler MV Dayspring once brought mackerel and herring to the shores of the Scottish Highlands. Last launched in the early 2000s, she had been safely moored for over a decade when she ran aground during a storm on the 8th of December 2011. She still sits on the shores of Loch Linhay and is sometimes known as the Old Boat of Cale. Today, photographers come from around the world to capture a shot of the wreck, as it can be pictured with the highest mountain in Britain, Ben Nevis, in the background. The ship is perched at a slightly odd angle, and locals still don't know exactly how it came to rest in its current position. Before it ran aground, its owners had planned to turn it into a floating restaurant. Next is the Sweepstakes in Ontario, Canada. If you're fascinated by shipwrecks, head to Ontario's Tobermory on the banks of Lake Huron. It's home to more than 25 stunning wrecks that can be explored on diving or snorkeling tours or aboard a glass-bottomed boat. The best known is Sweepstakes, a 119-foot schooner that sank in shallow water in 1885 after hitting a rock. Sweepstakes remained where it sank for a couple of weeks before being towed into the harbor. After the schooner was examined and found to have sustained irreparable damage, she was stripped of all her useful rigging and equipment and abandoned to the waters of the lake. Her hull, windlass, and part of the original bow rail are all still intact. Coming up is the Blankenese shipwreck in Hamburg, Germany. The beach at Blankenese on the Elbe River near Hamburg has become something of a shipping graveyard. The first wreck to be brought here was the Polstjernan, an old Finnish four-masted schooner that caught fire when its engine exploded in 1926. More recently, a barge called the Uwe sank here in 1975 after colliding with Wiedau, a coaster. The Uwe was torn to pieces with the biggest chunk, the stern, still sticking out of the water today. After World War II, the seawall built around the wreck of the Polstjernan was added to with the wrecks of German submarines, their slender skeletons still visible today at low tide. The wrecks are easily reached from Blankenese S-Bahn station and sit 320 yards down the beach from the lighthouse. The currents on this stretch of the Elbe are notoriously treacherous, as the captains of the ships wrecked here can attest. Next on the list is the MV Panayotis in Zakynthos, Greece. The MV Panayotis has become a major tourist attraction in recent years. The brown, rusting wreck is beautifully well preserved, protected from the elements by a sheltered cove, and stands as a perfect centerpiece for Navajo Beach, a secret stretch of sand also known as Shipwreck Beach, on the island's northwestern coast. The ship, which is thought to have been a smuggling vessel, was built in the 1930s and ran aground in the 1980s due to stormy weather. It's possible to admire the boat from the high cliffs above, or take a boat trip to the beach itself for a close-up view. Though almost synonymous with the Zakynthos, this much Instagrammed wreck has significantly deteriorated in the last decade, and its long-term future is uncertain. Our next ship is the Hilma hooker in Bonaire, Caribbeans, just one of over 60 spectacular dive sites in Bonaire. The Hilma hooker makes for a memorable underwater adventure. The 236-foot Dutch freighter originally sank in 1975, but was rescued and sold. There are many tales about its past lives, and the story goes that it was suspected of drug smuggling and found to be carrying a sizable stash behind a false bulkhead. The drug smuggling case never went anywhere, Officials never located the boat's owner, and eventually the ship was left unattended. It was towed out to sea and moored before sinking in 1984, landing conveniently between two coral reefs. It's now part of the Bonaire National Marine Park and is beloved by divers thanks to its well-developed, untouched, and colorful corals. Here we have the Pouta, British Columbia, Canada. The Pouta began life as a steamship before being converted to a log barge in the early 20th century. After a brutal storm in 1928, the 264-foot vessel was shipwrecked, ending its life on the pebble shores of the picturesque Haida-Gwaii archipelago in British Columbia. The remains of the Pouta are a popular tourist attraction. Listing slightly onto one side and slowly rotting away, the wreck still boasts metal portholes, and the skeleton of its hull remains clear to see. Visitors can walk right up to its bulk, but getting there involves a 4-hour round-trip hike through the forests and dunes of the Naikun Provincial Park on Graham Island. Next up is the MV Captayannis in Helensburgh, Scotland, known in Scotland as the Sugar Boat. The MV Captayannis was a Greek sugar-carrying ship that sank in the River Clyde in 1974 after a wild storm. The boat was irreparably damaged by a collision with the anchor chains of a large oil tanker, which drilled a hole in the boat below the waterline. The ship rolled onto her port side, and she's still that way decades later, emerging eerily from the sea. Plans to blow up the wreckage were discarded following concerns about the site's proximity to a local bird sanctuary. The wreck has never been moved and is now a popular spot with tourists, divers, and bird life alike. Next on the list is the SS Francisco Morazan in Michigan. The SS Francisco Morazan was built in the 1920s for German owners, but was subsequently sold to various governments over the years. She was to take her last journey in November 1960, setting sail from Chicago on the shores of Lake Michigan. The Great Lakes region sees notoriously risky weather as winter sets in, and the trip was always a slight gamble. Strong winds, fog, and heavy snow caused the ship to run aground some 300 feet off the southwest shore of South Manitou Island, Michigan. The crew abandoned ship soon after, and the vessel has been there ever since, now home to various species of bird. You can hike to view the ship for yourself from the shore, or take out a kayak to see it close up. Next is the Gardar BA 64 in Westfjords, Iceland, a former whaling and fishing vessel that's Iceland's oldest steel ship. Gardar BA 64 was built in the same year that the Titanic tragically sank, in 1912. Originally called Globe 4, the boat was built in Norway and made its way to Iceland in 1950. It's now more than a century old and is rusting away in the stunning surroundings of Iceland's west coast. The ship has been out of service since 1981, and instead of being scrapped, it was run aground in the Patreksfjordur fjord. Here it has remained, drawing photographers keen to capture its beauty. For safety reasons, tourists must not enter the vessel, as its structure has long since degraded and is no longer sound. Here is the SS Point Reyes in California. From elephant seals to a magnificent lighthouse, there's a lot to see at the 70,000-acre Point Reyes National Seashore in Northern California. In addition to the 1,500 species of plants and animals, there is also the SS Point Reyes, a fabulously photogenic shipwreck that's one of many along the treacherous rocks of the coast. Located in Tamales Bay, this is another shipwreck beloved by photographers, with the best shots taken during low tide. Here, the wreck is captured at night by professional photographer Cameron Venti, topped by the Milky Way. But its popularity also means it's under threat. In 2016, a fire ripped through the rear of the ship, while storms have since damaged it further. In 2024, the National Park Service acknowledged that it was exploring options for the wreck's possible removal. Now let's check out the Edvard Bohlen in Namibia. Namibia is one of the most spectacular places in the world to view eerie shipwrecks for yourself. Its skeleton coast is home to thousands of shipwrecked vessels scattered along the coastline, having failed to navigate the tempestuous seas and angry winds. One of these is the Edvard Bohlen, which is stranded in the middle of the desert, about a quarter of a mile from the shoreline. A former German cargo ship, the vessel ran aground, probably due to thick fog, while it was on its way to Table Bay. Years later, as the desert encroached on the ocean, the ship found itself adrift in the middle of the sand. Usually it's possible to see it for yourself on a flying safari or a guided 4x4 tour from Luderitz or Walvis Bay. Next up is the Zyla in Namibia, north of the Edvard Bohlen along the Skeleton Coast. This rusty wreck close to the shore is often covered with dozens of seabirds, making it an even eerier sight. The fishing trawler Zyla ran aground south of Henties Bay in August 2008 and has since been at the mercy of the stormy sea. The vessel was sold as scrap metal to an Indian company but got stranded after it came loose from its towing line on its way to Mumbai. The Zyla is now one of the most accessible wrecks along the Namibian coast, even though the sea is too rough to set foot on the decaying ship. It is best seen from the beach, an easy stop-off near the popular fishing spot Diawale. Last up is the Trinidad in Lake Michigan, Wisconsin. On the 15th of July, 2023, a remarkably intact wooden schooner that sank in Lake Michigan 150 years ago was discovered 10 miles off the Wisconsin. Shipwreck hunters Brendan Baylod and Bob Jeck found the Trinidad after a 2-year quest that saw them study historical records and scour the lake with sonar. "It's really like a ship in a bottle," Baylod told the New York Times. The 140-foot-long schooner was hauling coal bound for Milwaukee and sank on the 13th of May, 1881, going down so fast that the crew didn't have time to rescue the vessel's mascot, a Newfoundland dog who was asleep next to the stove. Baylod and Jeck reported their find to the State Historical Society of Wisconsin, who built a 3D photogrammetry model of the ship that allows people to explore the site virtually. Well, there you have it. If you enjoyed this journey through the top eerie shipwrecks in the world and want more of these adventures, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on those notifications. Thanks for watching, and until next time, happy adventures. Well, there you have it. If you enjoyed this journey through the top eerie shipwrecks in the world and want more of these adventures, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on those notifications. Thanks for watching, and until next time, happy adventures.